Hello, Nick Park here from Evangelical Alliance Ireland, and welcome to our weekly video entitled It's Friday, but Sunday's Coming. There are certain things that when I sit and share about them, it gives me great joy, and there are other subjects that are much more difficult and much more painful. Just over a week ago, I, like many of you, sat in absolute amazement, barely believing what I was seeing on my TV screen, as a mob stormed the US Capitol, attacking police officers and actually ending up killing one of them in the process. And of course, 4 other people lost their lives in that riot. Now, as I was watching it, I was paying great attention to the banners that people were waving and the flags that they were carrying. And in among their national flag, I also saw emblems of the far right. I saw emblems that carried racist connotations. I saw emblems of white nationalism. I saw those emblems to do with far-right conspiracy theories such as QAnon and Kekistan. And there in the midst of it all is a banner saying Jesus saves, and another one saying John 3:16. And as I'm staring at this mayhem, I'm saying, what on earth has Jesus got to do with any of this? Well, of course, the answer is that there were a fair number of people participating in that act of violence who would call themselves evangelical Christians. I saw that a few days later, one of the individuals who was actually carrying the speaker's podium, he was identified, and people were identifying him as a member of a Baptist church in Florida. The Baptist church, they responded pretty quickly, posting that he hadn't been to the church in years, and the way he was behaving certainly did not represent their values, and that they were not supportive of violence in any way. And certainly I would, if I was a pastor and somebody in one of our churches was behaving like that, I would want to disown them pretty quickly if they were participating in a deadly riot. It would be easy just to say, oh, well, nothing to do with us. But then this week we have another news story where, to be honest, it would be tempting to say it's nothing to do with us, but it would also be dishonest as well. I'm talking about the mother and baby homes scandal and the report that has been issued. And there's been a lot of anger, most of it directed, of course, at the Roman Catholic Church. But it is noticeable that one of the homes that was identified was the Bethany home, which was run by evangelical Protestants. It had a shockingly high rate of infant mortality. Over 200 children died there and ended up in unmarked graves. There was malnutrition, there was disease, there was overcrowding, underqualified staff, inadequate facilities, financial instability, unsuitable and unsafe adoptions and fostering coming out of that home. It would be so easy and so tempting for me to say, well, that was a long time ago and that's nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with us. Evangelical Alliance Ireland didn't even exist back when these things were happening. The home itself closed in 1972. I was 10 years old. Most of the abuse and the worst abuse and the neglect took place much earlier. We're talking back in the 40s and the 50s, and certainly before the 1960s, so over 50 years ago. But the fact is, these were Irish evangelicals. And sometimes we're very quick to claim the credit and the glory of evangelicals who did great things, whether it's William Wilberforce and his campaign to end slavery, or Martin Luther King and his campaign to end racial segregation and discrimination in the United States. While we were campaigning on the pro-life issue, I made frequent allusions to Wilberforce and to King. If we're going to take the credit for the good things that evangelicals do, then we can't dodge the responsibility when evangelicals behave in ways that are not praiseworthy and that we would rather not think about. I have to say that when I think that just hearing the stories, just hearing the testimonies of how mothers and children were marginalized and treated so badly in all of the mother and baby homes that we featured in the report, it made me ashamed. It made me repentant. Not that I had done any of this wrong, but people that shared my doctrinal beliefs and self-identification as an evangelical had participated in these actions. And it left me feeling heartbroken for the survivors as I struggled to try to come up with a statement in response to all that had happened. I was so aware that anything I might say would seem hollow to the survivors, many of whom are still badly affected today by what they went through back then. And really, it causes me to look at where we stand as the evangelical church today. We cannot change the things that happened 50 years or more ago, but we do need to acknowledge them. We don't hide them. We don't skip over them quickly and pass them by, because we need to ensure that we don't end up doing things that are similarly wrong, doing things that will be looked at with equal shame by evangelicals in another 50 years' time. When I look at what happened, for example, at the US Capitol, I ask myself, as evangelical Christians in Ireland, we live in a society where there are divisions. It may not appear to be quite as divided as the society in the US is at present, but there's a lot of division. There's a lot of anger out there. And are we going to just be more angry people, or are we going to be people who bring healing? Even when we get hurt, even when we feel like we're being marginalized, even when we feel that our rights are not being respected, are we just going to be the angry people? Or are we going to be the healing people? I look at what happened with the mother and baby homes. You know, it would not be the first time, it would not be the last time that evangelicals have set out with great plans to do something, possibly even with good intentions, and then through lack of resources and lack of plan or whatever, it's all gone horribly wrong. And I remember some years back when I was in England seeing a number of evangelical churches starting up schools when they did not have the expertise or the consistency in leadership and finances to maintain a school. And often those schools folded and kids were pushed around from one system into another, and it was the kids who suffered. Do we set out to do things when we lack resources? And I'm not just talking about stepping out in faith, but I'm talking about foolhardiness, where Jesus spoke about somebody who would try to build something without thinking whether they can complete it or not. I do believe that watching people who share my self-identification as an evangelical participating in a violent riot in the United States, or acknowledging the sins that were committed against women and children by people who called themselves evangelical Christians and shared my beliefs here in Ireland in decades gone by, what can we do? I do believe that there is a place for repentance, to say that we are so sorry, to express our horror and our sorrow that these things were done in our name. And we need to examine ourselves to make sure that we are not going to launch out into projects that will end up as another Bethany. We need to make sure that we don't, in getting angry all the time at government and society around us and everything else, end up inciting people in similar fashion as happened with that Capitol riot. You know, I have a passion for holiness and righteousness, and I'm grieved by the sin that I see in society. But I believe this, that our passion for righteousness should start with looking at ourselves rather than always condemning everybody else round about us. You know, the word Bethany, there is some discussion in theological circles about what it actually means in Hebrew. Some people think it means a house of welcome, and other people think it means a house of pain. I do know that for many children and mothers, What should have been a house of welcome turned out to be a house of pain, and that is a tragedy, and that is a wrong. But you know, the most common explanation for the word Bethany is it means a house of figs. We're reminded of Jesus whenever he went to the fig tree. He went because it was in bloom. The leaves were there. It was, you would expect to find fruit on it. And the promise led to nothing because it was barren and there was no fruit on it. And Jesus cursed the fig tree. I think that's possibly the only destructive miracle that Jesus ever worked. He worked lots of constructive miracles, but I believe his only destructive miracle was reserved for the fig tree because it promised fruit and did not deliver. And sadly, the Bethany home in many ways promised fruit that it did not deliver. And now government and others are dealing with the fallout of it. Now I know it's very easy to say, and I'm hearing people already on social media, Christians, saying things like, well, the church did this and the church did that, and that was terrible, but it was all society. The government was involved. It was all of society was wrong. It wasn't just the church. But here's the thing. We're not, as the church, we're not supposed to be just the same as the rest of society. We're supposed to be better. We claim to have something more. And that makes us like the fig tree that offers promise of fruit. To then turn around and say, we're just like everybody else anyway, is not good enough. Whatever society is like, we have to do better. So let's determine that we, as the people of God, will have a passion for righteousness, and it will start with ourselves. We're not going to be the angry people. We're going to be the healing people. And we're not going to be the people who incite to violence. We're going to be the people who are peacemakers like Jesus commanded us to be. And we're not going to be the people that make great promises and then don't deliver. But by the power of Jesus, we will deliver more than we have promised. That's a tall order, but I believe we can do it by the power of the Holy Spirit if we are honest enough to face up to the mistakes and the errors and the sin that sometimes occurs within this movement that I love called evangelical Christianity. This is a very serious message I'm sharing. I know. I really hope you're not going to finish watching this video feeling depressed. I'm saddened by so much that I've seen over these last 2 weeks, but I'm also full of hope because it might be Friday, but Sunday's coming. And I believe Jesus has something better in store for his church, and I want to be a part of it. And I would love for you to be a part of it also. So may God bless you, and join us again next week for our video every Friday. It's Friday, but Sunday's coming.